Hi, and welcome to BookFest 2021, a virtual conversation with Mark Coker, founder of Smashwords. And let's hope this is the last time we ever have to say it's a virtual conversation for anything. I'm Doug McIntyre, and I've been a professional writer for more than 40 years in film, television, and in print as a columnist for the Southern California Newsgroup, which includes the Los Angeles Daily News, the Orange County Register, Long Beach Press Telegram, etc., etc. And I'm also a newbie novelist going through the same struggles that so many of you have gone through or are going through. I'm going to keep the reading portion of this to a bare minimum because on these video conferences, I've discovered that if there's a lot of reading, the only thing we tend to see is this, male pattern balding and split ends. So I'm going to try to keep my eyes up here, but I do want to read the introduction for our guest, so I make sure I get everything right. Mark Coker is the founder of Smashwords back in 2008. Smashwords is the world's largest distributor of indie ebooks. It's the fast, free, and easy way for any author or publisher anywhere in the world to publish and distribute ebooks to the major retailers, including Barnes & Noble, Apple Books, Baker & Taylor, Cloud Library, and many, many more. With a catalog of over 500,000 titles from over 150,000 authors and publishers, contributing columnist to Publishers Weekly, Mark Coker is also the host of Smart Author podcast and the co-author of BoobTube with his wife, Leslie Ann. He also is the author of the Smashwords Style Guide, the Smashwords Book Marketing Guide, and the Secrets to Ebook Publishing Success. And it's a pleasure to welcome to the BookFest, Mark Coker. Mark, let me get into the cockpit here so I can join you. Welcome aboard. How are you?
Thank you, Doug, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. I'm really thrilled to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. This is it's a new universe, relatively speaking, even though it's become such a part of our lives. It seems like it's always been there, but boy, it really has happened so quickly. I want to start. Oh, so go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's amazing how the pandemic has really transformed how we operate as writers and publishers.
Yeah. And certainly Smashwords and the whole concept of ebooks has also revolutionized publishing. And we're going to get into that. Before we get into all of the backstory and all of those interesting questions that our participants want to hear you talk about, could you give us, and take as much time as you want, but just give us your overview of the state of the union of publishing in all its forms: traditional publishing, self-publishing, and ebook publishing?
That's a really big question.
Yes, it is. But you're the man who can answer it.
Well, I'm the guy with the opinions. I'll leave it to history to determine if my opinions are correct. There's a lot happening, a lot that has been happening. I like to focus on large macro trends. So rather than what's changing today and it's going to be different tomorrow, it's what are some of the broader waves that are driving the industry forward. So when we talk about traditional publishing is undergoing consolidation. When industries consolidate, they're not doing it because it's a great business opportunity. They're doing it because their markets are flat, stagnant, shrinking. They're doing it often for financial reasons to get economies of scale. When we see the traditional publishing industry consolidating further, when we see big publishers buying each other out, that's not a good thing for writers. Although I'm a big advocate of self-publishing, I love traditional publishers as well. They're an essential part of the publishing ecosystem. They create opportunities for writers.
To that point, by the way, Mark, from literally today's paper, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt was just sold to News Corp. So we're seeing the big fish eat the big fish. The really big fish eat the big fish.
Right, we're seeing that, and we're also seeing it's Penguin Random House is trying to acquire Simon & Schuster if the government lets that go through. The government should probably take a close look at that because it's when you got that consolidation, fewer opportunity for authors, you've got fewer editors competing for your rights. So advances are going to decline. There will be fewer imprints, fewer books published. So that's generally not a good situation if you're an author who's looking at the traditional route. So it's something just to be aware of. This is a long-term trend. We see some near-term manifestations of it, but this has been going on for a couple decades. In self-publishing, it's helpful to look back, back at 2007, 2008, when we started Smashwords. At that time, self-publishing was seen as the option of last resort for writers. Nobody wanted to self-publish because self-publishers were considered failed writers, because they weren't good enough to get a traditional publishing deal. And the truth of the matter is most self-published authors did fail, but it wasn't necessarily because they were poor writers. It was because they lacked distribution. 10, 12 years ago, publishing was a print-centric world. Most books were sold in the print format. When we launched Smashwords in 2008, ebooks accounted for less than 1% of the overall market. And in the print-centric world, the only way to get your book into bookstores, which is where readers went to purchase and discover books, was to be represented by a traditional publisher. So if you were a self-published author, it was going to be close to impossible to get your books in traditional bookstores. So of course you failed as a self-published print author. That was then. This is now. This now started 12 years ago with Amazon entering the market, with Smashwords entering the market. With the rise of ebooks, ebooks helped self-publishing realize its full potential. Because with ebooks, retailers, online retailers, are able to stock every single book. And if your book isn't selling well, even if you don't sell a single copy in the full year, the retailer's not going to pull your book from the shelf. Your book is going to occupy that shelf for as long as you want it to occupy, occupying that shelf. Retailers value diversity, they value selection, and they recognize that their readers appreciate the broadest possible selection, which is why the retailers want to carry your book, even if it's not, selling a lot. So that was really transformative. The ebooks made it possible for self-published books to get mainstream distribution. And Smashwords was part of that story. We were the first to open up Barnes & Noble to self-published ebooks. We were the first to open up Sony to self-published ebooks. Sony was an early pioneer in ebooks before they left the market. So that big problem 13 years ago was solved. That was giving authors the ability to have their books published, brought to market, and then judged by readers. So that was revolutionary. The first few years of that ebook revolution, everyone experienced exponential growth. The market went from 1% to 2% to 5%, and within 4 or 5 years, about 20% of all trade books sold were in the ebook format. But over the last 5, 6, 7 years, we've seen the overall market in terms of sales somewhat stagnate as ebooks and print books achieved equilibrium. And also as the dominant retailer took really dramatic steps continually, over the last 12 years, to lower the price of books and to devalue books and to train readers to think that ebooks should cost a lot less than they currently do. So that's kind of what's happening in self-publishing and traditional publishing from a high level. In terms of the opportunity for authors, I think it's still an awesome time to be a self-published author. 12 years ago, 10 years ago, you could start writing a book and you wouldn't know if your book would ever reach the market. But today, as a writer, you can start your book project, and with 100% assurance, you're going to know that one way or another, your book is going to reach the market. You're either going to work through the traditional route or you can self-publish. But either way, your book is going to be on that same virtual shelf as the traditionally published books. Readers don't care if a book is self-published or traditionally published. They care about the quality of your writing. So
in a sense, what you have been able to do with Smashwords and the whole technology is to democratize publishing. That publishing companies have always been gatekeepers. They can't publish everything that comes through their door. So they are making editorial judgments or marketing judgments. They're looking for what book they think will sell best. But you have been able to provide a distribution system that cuts the corner. Very much what happened in the music business. Once the technology allowed the garage band to sound as good as somebody recording at Studio A at Capitol Records, and now Billie Eilish has the best-selling record in the world, and she recorded in her bedroom with her brother.
Right, right. You know, there was this idea in publishing 12 years ago, and I keep referring to 12 years ago because that's really when I entered the market and became aware of what was going on. There were a lot of there was this idea that unless a traditional publisher acquired your book, that you just weren't good enough, and that you just had to keep working harder and harder until you were good enough, and then the publisher would bless you. Publishers acted as gods, not just gatekeepers. They determined which writers went on to become published authors, which writers' books were promoted heavily to the retailers and backed by marketing. And my idea was that there is exceptional wisdom and talent in ordinary people. Ordinary writers all around the world have exceptional abilities that they can share with the world. Every single one of us is good at something, or expert at something, or has strong opinions on something, or has something inspiring to say. Everyone who wants to publish a book should have a right to publish a book. I've always seen it as a matter of free speech. And I wanted to democratize publishing so that any writer anywhere in the world could self-publish. And I wanted to do it for free. Smashwords doesn't cost anything to use. We make our money only if your book sells. We take a 10% commission on the list price. So that's how we make our money. We're in it with you. And in that sense, we're very much like a traditional publisher. Although we don't pay advances and we don't take your rights, we only make money if you make money, just like a traditional publisher.
Let me go back to the beginning of Smashwords. For those who are unfamiliar with the story, you will certainly be able to relate to this aspect. You came to it the good old-fashioned way, as so many authors have experienced, through frustration, through, to use the other F word, the failure word, that you and your wife, Leslie Ann, wrote a book and you couldn't crack the code.
Exactly. So my wife, Leslie Ann, before we met, she was a reporter for Soap Opera Weekly magazine in Hollywood. Her job was to go to the sets of the soap operas, observe what was going on, interview the actors, and write stories behind the scenes. And when I first met her, she started telling me these stories about the actors and actresses. And she said, these actors and actresses are more over-the-top nuts than even the soap opera storylines. And if you've ever watched a soap opera, that says a lot. And so I suggested she write a book about it. And she said, well, why don't we write it together? And so I took a sabbatical from my job and we did that. And we moved down to Burbank for a couple months, interviewed industry insiders, agents, actors, managers, fan club managers, producers, collected all their dirt. And then we moved to a cabin in Vermont for 4 months and wrote our first novel together. It was an incredible experience. And then we were lucky enough to get represented by one of the top literary agencies in the country. Distel and Goddard was their name at the time. And they tried for 2 years to sell our book to all the major publishers in New York of commercial women's fiction. And they got 2 rounds of rejection for our book. And the common thread of feedback from the publishers was that previous novels targeting soap opera fans hadn't sold well. So they were reluctant to take a chance on our book because they didn't think there was a large enough market for it. And I started thinking about that experience. We weren't looking to make $1 million or to become famous authors. At the time, our Friday night date nights were visits to the local Barnes and Noble. We wanted to see our book on the shelf at our local Barnes and Noble. That was the extent of it. We wanted to become published authors, and to have the publishers shut the door in our faces was really, really upsetting. And then I thought about, the hundreds of thousands of other writers around the world who would never get published, who would go to their grave with unpublished manuscripts in the attic. And I just started thinking about the cultural travesty there, because we never know which books are going to become the next bestsellers or the next cultural classics. We just don't know. They're the books that come out of nowhere. They're the books that nobody believed in.
Well, and the number of considered to be immortals who got terrible reviews and mediocre sales, including Moby Dick, including The Great Gatsby, when it was first released, had bad reviews and bad sales.
Sure, and a lot of those books almost didn't get published. So you think about it, we have lost thousands, hundreds of thousands of important literary works to humanity simply because they couldn't get published. They weren't saved. They weren't archived. They weren't put into the public record. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be neat if someone somewhere could make it possible for any writer to publish a book and let the readers decide what's worth reading? And, I expected that most of the authors wouldn't sell well, but I also expected that a few of them would go on to become bestsellers. And that's exactly what happened. A small percentage of our authors went on to become, international megastars. And that's really exciting.
Now, it didn't start out that way, of course, because every startup, every entrepreneur knows that sooner or later, you got to go to mom and ask her for help.
You know our story.
I've been doing some homework on you.
Okay, well, thank you for that. All right, so yeah, here's the story. So that first year of Smashwords, 2008, and Smashwords is completely self-funded. There's no VC money. It was my personal savings. And so, the company was costing me $10,000 a month. By the end of the first year, we had about 140 books at Smashwords from 91 authors. And I was thrilled that so many authors entrusted their work to Smashwords. But on a good day, by the end of 2008, we were only selling about $10 worth of books. So we were netting a whopping $1 for our business a day at $10,000 a month. It was not looking sustainable. But we were, I believed that the world needed something like this. And in 2009, I realized that at the time, we were only selling books in our own little ebook store, the Smashwords store at smashwords.com. In 2009, I got the bright idea, thanks to one of our authors, that readers go to bookstores to buy books, bookstores they know and trust, to Barnes & Noble and others. And so we need to get our books in bookstores. And I didn't think the bookstores would want self-published books. I thought they'd be a little bit skeptical. But to my great surprise, I had that call with Barnes & Noble and they wanted all of our books. I had the call with Sony. They wanted all of our books. And once we decided to become a distributor, that changed everything. Once our books got distribution, they started selling. But even though sales were increasing in 2009, we were still losing money and I was running out of savings. And so I did what most people would do when you're in trouble and you need some money, you go to your mom. And so I went to my mom and mortgaged a house to her. And she gave me $200,000. It was all documented with the county and the state. This was a serious thing. If I didn't pay her back, she was going to get the house. But I was confident that we were on a track to profitability, and her loan, which ended up being kind of a bridge, got us to profitability and helped us become a sustainable business. It was a wild time.
Yeah, and now with 500,000 titles available. By the way, a little Mark Coker trivia. He has read every single book on Smashwords.
That's not true.
Well, I know you got a couple chapters left in that 500,000th book, but you'll get there. Have you ever, and this is kind of a broad contemporary question for what you do, given the sort of post-January 6th insurrection, Twitter censorship of the former president and of conspiracy groups, have you ever bounced a title from the catalog for any reason? And is that something that you've had internal discussions about?
We have regular discussions about that. As I mentioned, I'm a big believer in free speech. I'm a big believer in legal fiction. I believe that readers should have the right to fantasize about anything they want in their mind. We read a thriller novel and we're reading about vicious murders, but it doesn't mean we want to become a murderer. So I'm very protective of the right to publish, yet there's certain books that we will absolutely not publish. There are certain unforgivable sins that you can commit at Smashwords. We have a lot of erotica at Smashwords. Erotica is great, but if your erotica contains underage characters, we're going to ban you. We don't want you. We don't take books that advocate violence against other people. This is an interesting example. Very early on, at the start of Smashwords, this book was uploaded to us, and it was a book on how to commit suicide, and it looked at 12 different ways to commit suicide, and it kind of scientifically analyzed each one for pain, effectiveness, and all this stuff. It was professionally researched. No effing way were we going to publish this book. I'm not going to publish a book that is likely to kill someone or help someone get killed. So books like that are not allowed. And
what's the line you see between being a publisher and a distributor?
Well, a publisher is typically going to control the rights to a book. So when you're a self-published author, you are the publisher. A distributor, the job of a distributor is to get your book into bookstores and to get it into public libraries, or so that public libraries can purchase your book. And so when you work with a distributor, you upload your book once to the distributor, and then the distributor, like Smashwords, gives you a central dashboard. You can have 1,000 books with us, or 10 books, however many books you've published, and you can manage all of them from a central console. If you want to change their price at all the retailers, you do it with a single click. If you want to opt in or opt out of out of a retailer, you can do that. If you want to update the cover, change the content of the book, you do it once, and then that change propagates out.
So when you're wearing your multiple hats, though, Mark, and you're making these rare but important editorial decisions that we don't want this on our platform, we don't want to be distributed, we don't want any part of this particular type of material, are you wearing it as a publisher's hat or as a distributor's hat that you're making that call?
Well, I'm not wearing either hat. I'm wearing the hat of someone who's human, trying to protect people. And I'm also trying to protect self-published authors, because if we were to allow self-published authors to do really bad things, it would destroy the opportunity for all self-published authors. So there are certain standards.
That brings us to the
protect everybody.
That brings me to the topic, and you touched on it earlier. Certainly when you were beginning, there was a stigma attached to self-publishing that's still there for people. I mean, sure. Even though self-publishing is now 20%, essentially 20% of the book market. But I think the stigma that you're discussing, if a horrific piece of material comes across the platform, the negativity can rebound on the entire genre of writing. But so that's a special case. And there was a perception that that's what self-publishing was. It was like nut jobs who had crazy conspiracy theories or whatever, and no one would touch it. And that sort of became the umbrella that people put all self-published writing under. So that's significant. But could you also talk about the baked in, and I'm going to use an S word here, snobbery really is the word that comes in. And the reason I use it is because, and this is a pure self-confession, if I was doing this from another room in the house, there's 1,000 hardcover books with Mylar covers on custom-built bookshelves. I love the tactile feel, the scent, the smell. I love everything about a printed book. And to me, that's like still the holy grail of the whole process. But as we're seeing now, good luck getting somebody under 50 who doesn't read on a Kindle or an e-reader or some. So am I just hanging on to the buggy whip? Am I just hanging on to harpsichord music?
If you're hanging on to the buggy whip, I'm hanging on to it with you. I love print books. My wife and I have I don't know if it's a compulsion, but we love to go to used bookstores
Yeah.
and new bookstores. We own thousands of books, of print books. Print is just a format. And, you read whatever format you enjoy. Some readers enjoy certain formats in certain places and other formats in other places. My wife, for example, likes to read ebooks in bed, but when we're at the park, she reads in print. So I think both forms are very compatible with one another.
How does
But for most self-published authors, I should point out though, most self-published authors are earning most of their money from ebooks, not from print books.
Right. How does the ancillary markets of audiobooks fit into this?
So audiobooks are exciting. And we do offer an audiobook service through our partner Findaway. It's Smashwords. So with a single click, you can start the audiobook production process once you upload your book to Smashwords. Audiobooks are exciting to me because they open up the hours of reading available in the day. So more hours to read, more hours to enjoy books. So if you're washing the dishes, you can enjoy your book as you wash the dishes or as you go for a jog or a hike or whatever. So the audiobooks are growing quickly. The audiobook market will probably exceed the ebook market within a few years. But it's important for self-published authors to know that whereas an ebook costs essentially nothing to produce, once you've written the book, the act of turning it into an ebook can be done by yourself. You just read the Smashwords style guide and you can do it for free. But to produce an audiobook is typically thousands of dollars, especially if you're hiring a professional, and you should. I believe in hiring professionals for something like that, professional voice actors. And so, it's not uncommon for authors to spend $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 to produce an audiobook. That's a lot of money, and not all those authors are going to earn the money back. My suggestion, my guidance for authors, if you've got a book that you're really excited about, you're just starting off as an author, do it as an ebook first. And once you prove there's a commercial market for your book, then invest in the audiobook and potentially other formats.
How does that physically work for Smashwords? If somebody produces their audiobook, they then ship the audio files to you?
No, we don't sell or distribute audiobooks. What we do is, I should probably back up and explain how an author works with Smashwords. So you come to Smashwords, you sign up for a free account. When you're ready to publish your book, you upload your book either as a Microsoft Word file or as an EPUB file. EPUB is the open industry format that is used by all the major retailers now. We receive that book. We evaluate the book to make sure it meets the standards of the retailers, the distribution standards. And then if we approve it, it goes into the Smashwords premium catalog, which makes it eligible for distribution. Then it goes out to all of our distribution channels. With an audiobook, the way it works with us, the way we assist the production is once you've uploaded your book to Smashwords, we now have your EPUB file. And if you want to produce that book or consider producing that into an audiobook, you click a button from your dashboard. We transmit your EPUB file over to Findaway, which is our partner in audiobook production and distribution. And since they've got the ebook file, they know how many words it is. And then from the word count, they can estimate how many hours of audio this would be, and then they can estimate what the cost of production would be based on the different levels of narrators that you can select from. And so you can start auditioning narrators via Findaway. You find a narrator you love, Findaway produces the book, professionally edits the book, and then they distribute it to the different retailers that sell audiobooks. And when you do this through Smashwords, you're making exactly the same amount of money as you would make if you went direct to Findaway.
Can Smashwords distribute graphic novels?
We can. I would say graphic novels are not a very common format or common book type for self-published authors. The books that sell the best in ebooks are known as reflowable ebooks. These are the books that allow you to click a button and the font size increases and automatically as the words repaginate across the screen.
As the readers age,
Yeah.
they get bigger and bigger. I know that.
Well, as an aside, this is an interesting aside. When Amazon first launched the Kindle 12, 13 years ago, the early adopters, most of them were like over 40. People like myself who appreciate large type on a screen.
Yeah.
And that's something you can do with an ebook.
Let's talk about the tail that often wags the dog. Now, you started, by the way, before you went straight. You worked in public relations. And
Before I went straight.
Yeah, before you went legit here. But coming from that world, you obviously understand the value of promotion, because even with your own company with 500,000 titles, how does anybody make themselves stand out from that crowd? And that brings us to the tail that wags the dog today, which is social media presence. The stories are legend of even restaurants that if they have two choices to hire a waiter, they actually check the social media following of the two candidates, and they figure if they hire the guy who's got 1,000 followers versus the guy that has 60 followers, he'll be telling 1,000 people, "Hey, I got a job at Joe's Pizza Parlor." So even where it has nothing to necessarily to do with the actual function of the job, it can be a determinant on the success or failure of whatever the project is. And clearly, in a crowded field for the public's attention that books represent in a very crowded entertainment market, social media presence can be very, very important. Could you talk to us about that and ebooks?
Well, of course, every author should be on social media. A lot of authors face social media with quite a bit of consternation and fear, because a lot of authors most writers would rather just write, and a lot of writers don't want to feel like they have to go prostitute themselves on social media. My advice is to make yourself accessible on social media on the platforms that work for you. Like, don't go put yourself on Instagram if that's not your thing, because you want to be authentic, whatever you're doing. Now, if you're writing, fiction, you're going to want to be on, Twitter and Facebook and maybe Instagram if you do that. If you're writing nonfiction, LinkedIn is probably going to be a more important social media platform. Social media is important. Authenticity is important, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is the quality of your book. The most important thing in marketing is your book, because a great book markets itself on the wings of word of mouth, on the wings of reviews, of 5-star reviews. If you think about it, we've all read books that we enjoyed, but we're not going to go out and tell our friends to read them. But we've also all read books that shook our world, changed our perspective about everything. And we go to our friends and family, and we don't just recommend that they buy the book, we command them to buy the book.
Yeah, we
because
insist.
Yes, we want them to experience the same joy and love that we experienced. I mean, that's the wonderful nature of, reading a great book. It is really exciting that way. Forgot where I was going with that.
Well, is there a specific genre of literature that does particularly well through Smashwords?
Well, what does well through Smashwords is what does well in ebook form. And the number one selling category in ebooks is romance. Romance accounts for about half of our sales. So we love romance at Smashwords. Erotica is also very popular. Erotica was a market that was severely underserved by the conventional systems. fiction, narrative does really well. And because it's ideal for the reflowable ebook format. Nonfiction can do really well as well, especially the narrative nonfiction. But what's difficult to do is ebooks, going back to one of your original questions, graphic novels, tougher to do, because to do a graphic novel, typically you're going to do it in what's known as a fixed format. So the words cannot be, the font size can't change. It's like reading a PDF. Reading a PDF is not an enjoyable book experience for most people. So to do a graphic novel or to do a kid's picture book as an ebook, you can do it. But due to the nature of how readers like to read ebooks, those books become less accessible and can be less enjoyable to readers unless they're really done well.
I want to point out also that Mark hosts a podcast called Smart Author, and you can go to, of course, smashwords.com, and you'll find links to all the podcasts as well. And it's an excellent survey, sort of from the beginning of the idea through the important steps for e-publishing. So I highly recommend that for anybody who's interested in it. What was the first hit book that you distributed?
So the first book that really hit my radar in a big way, it was a series, The Morsyth Saga, from author Brian S. Pratt. So it's epic fantasy. And Brian did something that was extremely innovative and no one was doing at the time. He made the first book in his series free. He was one of the first authors at Smashwords to do that. And so he made the first book free, and then all the follow-on books were priced at $5.99. And so Brian broke a couple rules in the very beginning. Rule number one, there was this idea in publishing that you got to value your intellectual property and never give things away for free. Well, I knew from my background in the technology industry that free is a powerful marketing tool to introduce customers to your product and get them to subscribe or purchase your follow-on products. So Brian became one of our first bestsellers. He was one of the first to pioneer this idea of free series starters. And, he's a great writer and had, still has really enthusiastic fans. So he was the first one to really come across my radar that I recall. And then the next wave that I observed in 2009 were a lot of the different romance books. And, as I tried to understand, well, why was romance selling so well? It was really interesting. So prior to the introduction of Smashwords and ebooks and ebook self-publishing, if you were a romance author, you got a traditional publishing deal, like with Harlequin. Harlequin would publish a book, and then once they felt like they had totally exhausted the potential market for your book, they would give rights to your book back to you. That's called rights reversion. It's like, here's your book back. It's worth nothing to us now. And so the romance authors were sitting on a gold mine of professionally edited books, great books. And they started self-publishing them at 99 cents, $1.99, $2.99. And many of these authors, as I spoke to them in 2009, were telling me, Mark, I made more in my first month self-publishing at $2.99 than I did during my entire 2-year contract with the publisher. And so it was the romance authors that really started hitting it big with their books. And the romance authors who started hitting the New York Times bestseller list and the USA Today list. And each time these authors hit these bestseller lists, it was a wake-up call to the entire industry, especially to writers, because their success told people that, yes, you can self-publish with pride, professionalism, and commercial success. No one's, and that's really what caused a lot of the, the poor attitude about self-publishing, the stigma, to start to evaporate, because no one can argue with success.
Have you had traditional publishers acquire properties that you first distributed?
Yes, all the time. So one of the first authors that I remember hit me in a big way was Amanda Hawking. So Amanda Hawking was the first self-published author to sell 1 million copies. And she did that working through Smashwords and working through Amazon. So she was with us from the beginning. So Amanda Hawking was just this superstar paranormal romance writer. She's still writing. And so a publisher came along and acquired her titles. It was sad to see those titles disappear, but at the same time, I was really happy for Amanda because, I created this business to create opportunity for writers. And if you can come work with Smashwords and sell hundreds of thousands of copies and then get $1 million deal with HarperCollins or whomever, then I'm happy for you. And I know that, or I have confidence that you're probably going to come back to us. And most of the authors do. Some of the most successful authors in the market today are what are known as hybrid authors. So they're self-publishing and they're traditionally publishing. And the two work synergistically to maximize the success of both.
People write for a lot of reasons. There's a famous quote from Mark Twain. There's like 10 million famous quotes from Mark Twain, but the one that says that that nobody but a fool ever wrote for anything except money. But the reality is that all of us, with rare exception, write for love of the story we're telling and the physical experience of moving words around on a page to make them pretty. And if you make a living at it, that's an unbelievable dream come true. For whatever reason, when I was a kid, I was probably 14 and I was going through this Algonquin roundtable phase. So I was reading biographies of everybody. And I read a biography of Edna Ferber, who's really an almost forgotten author today, but she wrote Showboat and Giant and etc. She was once a huge selling author of fiction. But the only thing I remember from her autobiography is that she said, there aren't 100 people in the country who do what I do, fully self-support themselves writing long-form fiction. Now, she wrote that in the late 50s or early 1960s, and the number's probably higher than that today because of more platforms and more people. But the reality is that you're not going to go, it's really difficult to go into this thinking about selling 1 million of anything and getting rich doing it. But yeah, you can see your work exist, which I think is really fundamentally what drives people to write.
Yeah, writers write for reasons that are different than publishers publish. Publishers in the business of making money by selling books that they publish. Writers write for different reasons. And there are myriad reasons why writers write, but I would say you're right, that you're correct. The most common reason that writers write is because if we don't write, our heads are going to explode. We have something to say. There's something about creative expression that only writers understand. That the act of that creative expression is mind altering. It's moving. It's life changing to be a writer. But yeah, this is not a profession to enter if your goal is to make a lot of money. I've been telling people since the start of Smashwords, if you want to make a lot of money, go work at McDonald's. You're going to make more money on average working at McDonald's than you will as a self-published author.
Besides, Mark already hit up his mom, so you can't hit her.
Yeah, right. But I think it's important that this is one of the secrets of success in self-publishing. If you're writing for the passion of writing, if you're writing because every single word, every sentence, every paragraph nourishes your soul, then you are successful and you will persevere through the ups and downs, the inevitable ups and downs in this industry, because every writer is going to face dark days where the reasons to quit seem more numerous than the reasons to power on. And often the people who are encouraging you to quit are those who love you the most, because they see the pain that a writer goes through. They see the sacrifices that a writer makes to produce their work. And they see the heartache when you produce your work and it doesn't achieve the potential that you would expect it to achieve. So if you're writing for the passion, you're going to keep writing. And the more you write, the more you publish, the better the writer you're going to be, the greater the platform you're going to build, the more fans you're going to amass, and the higher the likelihood that one day you're going to come out of nowhere and become an international bestseller. Most international bestsellers toiled in obscurity before they became an international bestseller.
Well, you're putting the proverbial pebble in the pond, and you don't know where those ideas go out. So I remember many years ago reading, I will read really obscure stuff. And I was sitting reading this book, I don't know why, I got for 50 cents called A Brief History of Norway. And I am grateful it was a brief history of Norway. But while I was reading it, I distinctly remember thinking, I am probably the only person on earth who's reading this book right now. But that's also the beauty of it, that some thing that somebody had, a bee in their bonnet about doing is in the world, and you don't know when somebody will stumble upon it.
Exactly. And that book that you read about Norway and Norway's history is no less important than a New York Times bestseller. I've been saying from the very beginning that even if your book has a potential market of one person, like let's say you're a grandparent, and you want to write your family history so that your grandchildren that you don't even have yet can someday know who you were. That book is just as important as any other book. Every book is important.
Let's talk about your books for a second. We touched on BoobTube, which is available, obviously, as a novel. Yeah. But let's talk about the Smashwords books, the Style Guide, the Book Marketing Guide, and the Secrets to E-Publishing Success. Start with the Style Guide. What do you cover in that book?
So these three books cover ebook publishing best practices, and they're all priced at free as ebooks. So the Smashwords Style Guide teaches you how to professionally design and format and produce an ebook using just Microsoft Word. So if you want to learn how to format your own book and self-publish, then check out this book. And it'll also teach you a lot about, the background of ebook publishing and the technology of ebooks. A lot of authors are somewhat intimidated by the technology of ebooks, but once you get into it, you see that it's really simple. So that's the Style Guide. The Smashwords Book Marketing Guide just had a major revision 2 years ago. I completely rewrote it. 65 book marketing ideas. All of them are free, covered in that book. So check that out. Even if you don't even publish ebooks, even if you're only doing print books, even if you're a traditionally published author, you're going to get amazing ideas out of that book. And then the Secrets to Ebook Publishing Success, that book is ready for a revision, but it still has a lot of good stuff. So for that book, I basically looked at the most successful authors at Smashwords at the time and studied what were they doing, what were the successful habits, or what were the habits of the most successful authors, and that's what I covered in that book. The boutique areas of publishing, and I say that because they're almost always done by indie presses, things like poetry, and those categories, that's also, and short stories, by the way, short story collections of poetry generally are tougher sells in the mass market. But I assume that you have many titles on Smashwords that cover those genres. Sure. We love poetry at Smashwords. It doesn't sell very well, but I love that we can help poets publish their poetry and get it out into the hands of readers. We publish everything.
Again, 500,000 titles, covering 150,000 authors and publishers. So it's an amazing catalog. All right, we're coming to the end of our time, Mark, and I've certainly enjoyed this conversation enormously. And I certainly hope that our attendees of the conference of the book fair do as well. And you can certainly You go to smashwords.com, get the podcast, the Smart Author Podcast, and there'll be links to everything that we've talked about here and more. But I want to ask you, what was the title that surprised you the most? That when you saw this is a hit, is there one that jumps to mind?
Well, I'll go way back. I don't remember the title. I remember the type of book that it was. Very early on at Smashwords, I think it was probably the second year that we were in business, so 2009, a football coach came to Smashwords and published his ebook. And it was a book on high school football coaching. Don't remember the title or the author name. He priced it at $25. And I saw this book and I thought, okay, an ebook at $25, no way it's going to sell. It's just too expensive. And I was dead wrong. It sold really well. And that to me was a lesson that we don't know. None of us know what works and what doesn't work. One of the most wondrous things about those early years at Smashwords is that no one in the industry knew how to publish ebooks, how to market ebooks. And you had all these thousands of self-published, all these thousands of scrappy self-published authors with no money to market. And they had to get creative and do things that people thought were stupid, like Brian Pratt pricing his series starter at free. Now this is a industry recognized best practice in self-publishing that if you want to sell more books, price your series starter at free and you're probably going to sell a lot more books. So you had these authors just trying things. And authors were doing a lot of dumb things or things that seemed dumb, but were brilliant in retrospect. And that just told me that, I don't know everything. I'm never going to know everything. None of us know everything. And, there's room in this business for lots of experimentation. That's one of the exciting things about ebook self-publishing. Like, you can price your book at $25 if you think it's worth $25. If the market doesn't respond, you can price it down to $5 or $2. Or if you think it's worth $100, you price it at $100. You're in control. You're the publisher. You are the one who's accountable to the marketplace based on the quality of your book and the pricing and the distribution.
Where would you like to, and we'll end with this, where would you like to see Smashwords and publishing in general, let's say 5 years down the road? 5 years in today's technology could be a whole new universe. Who knows?
Well, when I started Smashwords, I had this idea. I thought it'd be really exciting if we could publish every single book in the world. So I would still like to do that. We're not there yet. So our job is not done.
When Mark Coker is not running Smashwords, he's hiking tall mountains, including the snows of Mount Kilimanjaro. He's gardening and hiking all over the world. And we're certainly glad that he was able to spend an hour with us on the Spring BookFest 2021. Mark Coker, thanks so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it.
Doug, my pleasure. And thank you for the conversation. It's been enjoyable.
We'll see you next year, folks, and hopefully with no masks and no COVID and in person. I'm Doug McIntyre for the BookFest.
Take care, everyone.